The North American Military Alliance near Brussels intercepted a reflected UFO signal. On radar, the object looked like an airplane flying at a speed of 50 km per hour and constantly changing course and altitude. He didn't give any identification signals. All this was suspicious, and 2 F-16 aircraft were ordered to take off and pursue the alien. The fighters held the target for 6 seconds. The object in an instant reached a speed of 1,800 km per hour, dropped sharply and disappeared from the screens. By this time, unidentified objects had been keeping the inhabitants of Belgium in fear for several months. Many saw huge black triangles above the roofs of their houses. On their bottom were 3 powerful searchlights and a flashing red lantern. Alien apparatuses slowly combed the area with beams, sometimes hovering completely silently over people's heads. The Belgian defense minister has officially stated that these objects cannot be ground reconnaissance aircraft. Since then, in many parts of the globe, and most often in Russia, they began to see these fantastic objects, sometimes behaving aggressively. They were nicknamed the Belgian Triangles. The UFO phenomenon is considered a product of the 20th century, when technological progress and science fiction made a colossal leap forward. However, the name unidentified flying objects has only recently appeared. And the UFO mystery itself is older than humanity. Perhaps the confrontation of intelligent races has been going on for many thousands of years. The first mention of alien ships is found in ancient Egyptian papyri. The chronicles of Pharaoh Thutmose III tell about fireballs that flew over the location of troops 3,500 years ago. The biblical prophet Ezekiel in the 600th year BC saw a ship of amazing design. And Saint Enoch was even taken up to the dwelling places of the gods. In 1566th year, a battle of 2 types of UFOs was observed in the sky of the Swiss city of Basel. This story is captured in an engraving. In Spain and Italy there are frescoes of the 15th century, where saints are depicted in spacesuits, and strange objects are visible above the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus, releasing rays. And Saint Anthony was once met by terrible demons with empty black eyes and wrinkled bodies. They got out of a burning chariot that flew straight from hell. However, the first conflicts with the participation of star guests occurred even earlier. The first civilizations on Earth are considered to be the Sumerians. 8,000 years ago, they occupied the region from modern Turkey to Iraq. The Sumerians paid a lot of attention to their gods. The minor deities were called Anunnaki, the supreme ones were called Nephilim. The gods of the Sumerians were originally from the planet Nibiru. On Earth, they have been mining gold and uranium for hundreds of thousands of years. At first, the Anunnaki did it themselves, then they got tired of working. An uprising broke out in the mines against the Nephilim leaders. The supreme gods solved the problem simply. The chronicles say they added a part of themselves to the monkey's flesh. So man arose. The newcomers from Nibiru gave the first people a civilization. The language and writing of the Sumerians have no analogues on Earth. They had a complex number system, advanced medicine and jurisprudence. Sumerian craftsmen were skilled at smelting metals and farming. Astronomers are studying the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. According to all calculations, there used to be a planet there, but now there are only fragments left. Scientists call this supposed celestial body Phaeton. Modern science cannot name the cause of his death. And ancient legends of many people speak of superdestructive weapons, from which the Phaeton split into pieces. Its inhabitants, however, by that time had a base on Earth. Perhaps, having lost their planet, they continued to fight on ours. For a place in the sun or in our mine. Today we can imagine the level of development, as well as the morality of a civilization capable of tearing the planet to pieces during a war. Is it unclear what, where and why the gods have gone? And whose ships, and for what purpose, are still plowing near-Earth space? Military aviation has repeatedly received orders to destroy UFOs and retrieve the wreckage. Fighters were alerted. But the UFO attack always ended badly. Colonel Alexander Kopeikin personally had to fly out to intercept unidentified objects. In the summer of '82, he tried to enter inside an incomprehensible black cloud that appeared over a military base. The diameter of the cloud was about a kilometer, and it hung absolutely motionless and was not probed by locators. Communication with the airfield, over which the cloud hovered, was lost, and the pilot's attempt to simply approach the object almost cost him his life. And the plane went out of control, literally. It began to shake, it began to throw left and right, so we reached the lantern with our heads, so the siren turned on in the headphones. Well, an incredible volume, at the level of the pain threshold it was. Kopeikin tore off the headset and de-energized the plane, trying to simultaneously take the uncontrolled car away from the cloud. He managed it only by some miracle. However, in some cases, the behavior of UFOs could be regarded as an attack. On the 7th of September, 1984, a UFO attacked a civilian passenger plane in the air corridor over Minsk. At 4:10 in the morning, the crew of two Tu-134 civil aviation aircraft noticed how a round object of bright yellow color appeared on the horizon. After a few seconds, it turned into a cross. A strange object fired a dazzling white beam at one of the liners, and then disappeared. This radiation became fatal for the crew. After landing, the aircraft commander died. Another pilot was written off due to disability, and one of the flight attendants was found to have unknown diseases. This case was investigated by several aviation commissions. It was found that the pilots suffered from unknown radiation. The story about the air emergency over Minsk got into the newspapers. In January 1985, an article with the headline exactly at 4:10 was written in the newspaper Trud about a strange case in the air. The rays that strike from UFOs are the main manipulator of their actions. The researchers collected thousands of eyewitness accounts and identified patterns. When the beam is used to kidnap a person, it is empty inside. These rays can even bend. By the autumn of the 72nd year, the confrontation between the USSR and the USA in the North Atlantic takes on an almost open character. NATO is seriously concerned about the facts of unpunished penetration of submarines and reconnaissance aircraft into the territory of the Scandinavian countries. The Allies believe they are dealing with Soviet military forces. It was decided to teach the Russians a lesson. Operation Aeneid involves direct combat operations. The Norwegians, together with NATO ships, are bombing their tourist pearl, Sokio Fjord, in the hope of squeezing out border violators. The apparatuses do appear above the surface of the water. With incredible speed and maneuverability, either a glowing ellipse or a long black cigar emerges. Then black flying objects appear over the fjord. After that, all the electronics on the Allied anti-submarine ships fail. All the mysterious apparatuses leave the place of hostilities with lightning speed. Sweden and Norway are beginning to doubt that they are dealing with Soviet ships. Moreover, the United States, the main opponent of the Soviet Union, does not support the version of the Soviet provocation this time. Americans quickly understand what they are facing. Intelligence has repeatedly informed the Pentagon about unidentified objects that not only monitored the U.S. submarine forces, but also caused the death of American submarines. UFOs could be incredible. They combined the quality of a submarine and an airplane. More than once, these objects flew out of the water, literally under the noses of anti-submarine cruisers, and were carried away into the sky at spheres of sonic velocity. It was not possible to prove the involvement of Soviet formations in the violation of the Norwegian border. The conflict was curtailed. In 1980, in the 50th Division of the Strategic Missile Forces of the Carpathian Military District, a chip occurred. Suddenly, several devices of obviously artificial origin appeared above the command post. And right after that, incredible things began to happen. The start scoreboard lit up. All systems were ready to work. It was possible to regain control of the nuclear complex only after the UFOs also suddenly disappeared. Soviet intelligence learned that a similar case occurred at the missile base of the U.S. Armed Forces. The sudden appearance of a UFO in the area of the command post, then the activation of the automated control system in the combat readiness mode. And only repeated control made it possible to avoid a nuclear USC, which would inevitably lead to the outbreak of the Third World War. From these facts, experts privy to the essence of the problem were forced to draw shocking conclusions. Some third force is testing the strength of the nuclear locks of the two superpowers. In January 1947 year, the expedition of the legendary American polar explorer Admiral Richard Byrd reaches its goal off the coast of Antarctica. The mission of the U.S. Navy is called Operation High Jump. Admiral Byrd has a powerful squadron under his command. The aircraft carrier Casablanca, 12 warships, a submarine, 2.5 dozen planes and helicopters. Almost 5,000 employees. And suddenly something mysterious happens. The expedition, designed for 6 months, is hastily wrapped up in 2 months and leaves the shores of Antarctica. This is a real escape. Upon his return, Admiral Byrd appears before the members of the Extraordinary Commission of Inquiry of the U.S. Congress. Fragments from his report were leaked to the press. The United States needs to take defensive actions against enemy fighters flying out of the polar regions. In the event of a new war, America may be attacked by an enemy with the ability to fly from one pole to another at an incredible speed. Who put the American squadron to flight? A year and a half before the expedition of Admiral Byrd, in the summer of the 45th, 2 German submarines entered the Argentine port of Mar del Plata and surrendered to the authorities. These were boats from the Führer's special convoy. So the commander of U-530 told about his participation in the operation codenamed Valkyrie II. 3 weeks before the end of the war, his submarine delivered to Antarctica relics of the Third Reich, Hitler's personal belongings, as well as passengers whose faces were hidden by bandages. The commander of the other boat, U-977 Heinz Schaefer, testified that he repeated the same route a little later. It also turned out that German submarines repeatedly went to Antarctica. There is a theory according to which the Führer was preparing for himself, in case of defeat, a reserve foothold in the inner cavities of the Earth under the south pole of the planet. Be that as it may, the archives show that 20,000 Aryans with families, a multi-ton cargo, dozens of ships and 20 submarines disappeared without a trace. Admiral Byrd's pay was not the first to be rebuffed by flying discs. As soon as Soviet intelligence was convinced that the bodies of not Hitler and Eva Braun were lying in the bunker, but their doppelgangers, the High Command sent 3 submarines to search for the fugitives. The Nazi leaders were going to look in Latin America or under the ice of the South Pole. According to the declassified archives of the Third Reich, scientists of Nazi Germany worked on the creation of a new generation of aircraft in the form of a disc. They supposedly got their idea in Tibet, from the keepers of the heritage of ancient civilizations. In 1939, a prototype disc in a reel with an engine of the inventor Skayerberger took to the air. A rare photograph of the test flight of this disc has been preserved. Winter camouflage coloring. At the end of 1942, a lightly armed flying disc flew into the Real 1 Jaeger with a diameter of 11 meters. Some historians claim that 17 such devices were manufactured before the end of the war. But there is no evidence that German flying saucers went beyond prototypes. According to experts, to perform such supernatural maneuvers, they had to have an anti-gravity field and another source of energy. In November 1985, U.S. President Ronald Reagan, at a meeting in Geneva with the General Secretary of the CPSU Central Committee Mikhail Gorbachev, unexpectedly spoke about the threat of an alien invasion of the Earth. The American leader, in fact, proposed to forget about the Cold War and join forces in the face of a hypothetical strike from outer space. It was known that the Americans spent much more money on their missile defense than was required. And here, too, allegedly footage of the interrogation of a living alien. The person who released the tape introduced himself as a native of the Special Services. According to him, near Roswell, the U.S. military allegedly managed to capture a crew of 4 creatures, one of which was still breathing, and deliver them to Zone 51. The humanoid is asked questions. If the video is a fake, the question arises, for what purpose was it done? It is believed that from 1947 to 1952 year, 16 UFOs actually crashed or were shot down in the United States. The U.S. military allegedly got 65 corpses of extraterrestrial beings, and 1 alien was taken alive, which is why the states made a breakthrough in technology. In 1953, General Dwight Eisenhower became President of the United States. In the same year, 26 more alien corpses and 4 prisoners were taken to secret bases in the United States. They were taken over by the top-secret structure Majestic 12. Then large spaceships appeared in Earth's orbit. They established radio contact with the U.S. government, and already in 1954, they began to make trial landings. The aliens claimed to come from a planet that orbits the brightest star in the constellation Orion, Betelgeuse. Supposedly their planet is dying and they have nowhere to live. Therefore, they ask the Earth for a little living space. On February 21, 1954, at the Edwards Air Force Base in California, President Dwight Eisenhower met with aliens and signed a historic treaty with them. The uninvited guests had to be placed in underground bases, because they decided not to advertise their existence. There, the Greys transferred technology to people. Gordon Cooper was part of the first group of American astronauts, the so-called Magnificent Seven. The astronaut believed the U.S. government was hiding the truth about flying saucers.
Representatives of many worlds are present here on Earth. Some are very friendly to us, others, on the contrary, are very dangerous.
Gordon Cooper started his career as a fighter pilot. In the 57th year, he served at Edwards Air Force Base in California. There is a spare spaceport for the shuttle. It all started when Lieutenant Cooper was rushed in with a report. A flying saucer lands at the airbase.
This object was shaped like a double saucer. He came to the attention of the personnel. Then it hovered, began to land absolutely noiselessly and released 3 supports from the bottom. Finally, he managed to stand on these tripods. At that time I was in the office, in the 3rd building from the landing site of the object.
Experiments were constantly carried out at the Edwards base and there was video surveillance around the perimeter of the base. And there were 2 cameramen with portable cameras on the territory at that very moment. They ran to the UFO without stopping shooting. When people approached, the object pulled the supports back and soared into the sky. Gordon Cooper watched from the window. When the film was developed, he looked at the plate again and dialed the number at the Pentagon.
I reported the incident upstairs. I was ordered to lock the developed film in a safe. A man with a convoy has already been sent to us on a jet plane to pick up this fin and transfer it directly to Washington. It was such a nervous moment. The general was yelling at me into the phone to hide everything immediately.
Years later, as a legendary astronaut, Cooper tried to get that tape from the secret archives of the Pentagon. In vain. On November 27, 1978, the astronaut addressed a special closed committee of the United Nations. His report contained facts of active UFO activity in the United States. But the Earthlings were much weaker than their older brothers once. For a long time, we just had to close our eyes to the alien lawlessness. The Pentagon and the White House decided not to unleash the conflict until they create a weapon with which they can talk on equal terms. Priority was given to weapons, the principle of operation of which was based on beams of free electrons. Electromagnetic blasters could disable both the enemy's equipment and himself at a distance. According to some reports, the U.S. military managed to create something similar by analyzing fragments of fallen MLOs. While science fiction theorists are talking about Star Wars in deep space, it may turn out that the enemy has been at our gates for a long time. He sits in well-fortified secret bases inside our planet, inaccessible and invulnerable, while humanity has nothing to oppose him. However, the most terrible threat that a person can face when meeting an alien invader is the loss of a soul. Facts about UFO sightings say that other beings possess psychotronic means of influence. This is the most effective weapon, to force the enemy to surrender instantly and voluntarily, a cheap and fast way of waging war, allowing you to save all the desired resources. Perhaps it was once so. Beings came from outer space who wanted to extract minerals, and inspired the savages that they were gods demanding love and obedience. In the name of whatever the wars of the future begin, for the sake of seizing new territories and spheres of influence, for resources or ideas, no one will risk the most precious thing, life. People will huddle in impenetrable shelters and fight with remote-controlled cars. The number of UFO sightings is growing every year. Especially often they appear near military bases and strategic facilities. But more and more experts believe that the impact of UFOs is actually not an attempted attack, but a side effect of studying our technology. Perhaps, in fact, we see observer ships that are designed to deter human aggression. It is even possible that they will influence the policy of Earthlings so that humanity does not destroy itself and the planet in internecine wars. Suddenly, these are our guardians, designed to protect us from external threats and our own imprudence. A starship trooper that guards a fragile and promising life form. Or he looks at how she would not destroy the planet, where there is still a lot of energy raw materials.